and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Austin.
Lenny.
And I'm Josh. Lenny, welcome back. We had you on for the comic book episode last season.
Which was fun.
Yes, we really enjoyed having you, and we really enjoy your perspective on things. No matter if it, whether it is praise or bashing.
I feel like you get a lot of bashing from me, but that's all right.
Yeah, I can attest. I took a class with him and he didn't like any of the works. But Austin, Larry, it's always great to have you.
What's going on, Josh?
Ready? Just same old thing. Already. We're going to be going over another short story by Ernest Hemingway. We've gone over Hills Like White Elephants and The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Now we're going over The Capital of the World, set in Spain. Already, Larry, you have a discussion starter for this discussion?
Okay. I feel like I'm on the spot.
You are.
All right. Let's see. Let's see. What do I want to start with? Okay, so to start this discussion, what I thought I'd do is just read a couple lines of dialogue back and forth here that I think are really kind of great. We have the three waiters in the middle of the story who are waiting on the three tables that are left in the restaurant. And they're talking about, one of the waiters is kind of a communist. He's going to a communist meeting, and he's talking about how he'd like to kill the priests and all this kind of stuff. And he's talking to the older waiter who's just there being a waiter. He's a worker, and this is an exchange that they have here. The older waiter says, "I have always worked," said the older waiter. "Go on to the meeting. There is no necessity to stay." To which, and he goes, you are a good comrade," said the tall waiter, "but you lack all ideology." To which the younger waiter replies in Spanish, "It is better to lack that than work," says the older waiter. Go on to the meeting. Paco said nothing. He did not yet understand. Oh, okay. So anyway, that's pretty much where I wanted to start. There's another part not long after here where the younger waiter says to the older waiter, maybe it was just before it, "How can there be solidarity of workers with fools like you?" is what the young waiter asked the older waiter. So to me, right, that's kind of like the whole problem with communism wrapped up in a line there, is that here you have this communist meeting talking about the unification of workers, yet you have one worker who disagrees with another worker, and that worker who is the communist, who claims to be taking action in name of all workers, says, well, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem if you don't agree with me on pretty much this entire ideology.
So I think what's interesting here is that so communism is big, right? There's a lot of different types, a lot of different ideology underneath it, and this particular person is an anarcho-syndicalist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is a specific type of ideology that if we're looking at the 4-quadrant things, which there's memes of, all political chart memes. There's a great Facebook page. Have fun. But they would be more bottom left. So they believe in, like you said, kind of the idea of anarcho-syndicalism. Anarcho comes from a stateless government, and syndicalism comes from this idea of workers uniting together for their common good. But I think that what's honestly a very good criticism of that is kind of what you bring up. Specifically like in anarcho-syndicalism, right? What happens if these group of workers can't unite for this common good or whatever they want to consider it? Because even if they agree on what they want, let's say they all agree we want a living wage, they might disagree on how to get there, and that might become a difficult thing to work together. So I'm not a political science person a whole lot, but I also don't know if it's fair to say with this one particular person who is an anarcho-syndicalist who, to my knowledge, I don't know because I was trying to look into that a little bit because I thought it was interesting. I think that was a movement in Spain at the time. And so who knows, this kid could just be, I'm upset, I'm a worker, and I'm going to follow this thing, and I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to come for you. And I think that's also something that I see a lot in a lot of different political groups that I, will see on Facebook or on social media or even in meetings. People will kind of disagree and will say, well, this is ideology. This is how exactly it is, and you're laughing at that. And I think that becomes this thing where it kind of sucks that people do that because it's like, especially in this particular political belief that's all about the worker, it's kind of like, okay, but like, if I'm really a worker and I'm working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, do you really expect me to read all these books that you've read and have the exact same ideologies? Yeah. So I think that's a totally fair.
Yeah, and it's about different value systems too. Like the worker values work. The old waiter values work. That's what he values above ideology. The ideologist values the ideology above all.
And then you have Paco, who values bullfighting.
Yeah.
Well, Paco. Okay, I think the way that he's Paco, right?
Paco.
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, I think that the way that he's presented in this book is that he's like just naive. Like there's a line not long after that where they talk about Paco, and he's like, he wanted to kill the priest, keep working at the restaurant, and be a bullfighter all at the same time. Like he's just raw potential.
If it were up to him, I think that he would want to strictly he'd strictly want to be a bullfighter.
Well, that is definitely what. Yeah, like.
But I think he has that idea that in order to actually bring in a consistent income, he would need to also work.
No, see, I think you're giving Paco too much credit for thinking things through. I mean, obviously, he's not a guy that thinks things through.
There are things. Grant, he's young. That's the thing.
Can I see the story again? Exactly, he's young. Let me see exactly how Hemingway put it here. To us.
And he values most his the matadors and the bullfighters.
Well, that's what he's most attracted to. They make that pretty clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I also think for a person, I mean, this could just be my reading, but for a person who I think I see politics in everything, my takeaway from this short story was really
Larry Austin Larry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
You said something about seeing politics and everything.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah. Which we both do. I wasn't gonna joke.
They just didn't get that.
Yeah, it went right over. But I don't think that was my takeaway in this story. I think my takeaway in this story was more. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say it was necessarily like the futility of everything, but just like
That was in there.
the complete randomness.
That was in
The
there.
ending. I think what's so interesting is Paco's, but talks so much. He's like, "Oh, I want to be a bullfighter," and these are all the things. And then him and Enrique, thank you. Him and Enrique, have a bottle of wine, they're having a great time, and then they're messing around, they're horse playing, and all of a sudden, well, now Paco's dead, and he's never gonna, meet his dream of being a bullfighter.
Tying those knives on the chairs and napkins and reenacting a bullfight.
It's not a good idea.
Not the best thing to do when you're intoxicated.
I think one thing that, and this might go hand in hand, I'm not on the political side of anything, but this might go hand in hand with what you're saying, is that we have two different representations. You have the older waiter, the tall waiter, and Paco. Then you have the disgraced bullfighter, the sick bullfighter, and the coward bullfighter.
Mm-hmm.
So we see things in threes in this story, where Paco represents, he's kind of seeing these different angles. So he hears the one waiter saying, "Hey, I want to kill this priest," and he's like, "Hey, that's not a bad idea." Then he sees these bullfighters who he idealizes, and he's like, it's almost like he sees this fantasy of, but not reality. And then the reality is at the end, he's like, "I'd be this great bullfighter because I could do this, and I do it in my mind all the time," and he dies. So it's almost like a loss of innocence in a sense. So
It's I think what it is it's a representation of the danger of the world when you're naive. Like if you're not properly prepared to expect the malice and not just Mouse, right? Because they make a point of saying that the dishwasher is a cynic. And then it's immediately after that where he actually brings the knives out. And then Paco's like, fine, let's do it. And then all of a sudden, Hemingway makes a note, now the cynic becomes sincere with what he's saying, right? Like he's no longer just saying things to be a jerk. And by then it's almost too late for Paco. Like he's already started on this line. And he is kind of like the essence of innocence, right? Like he doesn't know, the tenets of communism. He doesn't know necessarily what cynicism is even. He's just there to experience life, but he's not really prepared to do it.
And
I saw a lot of it from the bullfighting point of view, which in Spain, bullfighting, they make a great deal out of it.
Oh, sure.
And the particular, but at the same time, you have the serious one, or I wrote down that he was the novelty. I think that's a term that Hemingway used to describe him. The fact that he is old school and traditional.
The bullfighter, the short one, because he was a novelty, but then not a novelty because there are other short bullfighters or something like that.
Pretty much, there were other bullfighters, and they also had another gig to them. It seemed like this one just played by the book, and he lost interest with the general public, who I think that's very reminiscent of, I think even presidential candidates. A lot of it has to do with charm, appearance, taglines. John Adams spoke with a lisp. Thomas Jefferson only gave 2 speeches his entire life, and those were his inaugural addresses. And George Washington was a very awkward presence, in all honesty. And I think that how that applies to this is, as we progress in time, we expect a complete package, and the things that we value, we take a more materialistic, physical imagery point of view on what we want, and not necessarily look at the quality of what it has to offer.
Yeah, it seems like the city of Madrid is painted in a way where nobody's really interested in anything good, right? Like, I mean, everybody's kind of out for themselves to an extent. Like, this boy is, kind of completely just swept up in this city where everybody has all these different things going on, right? Where you got the bullfighters, who are out there making names for themselves and living off fame. You got his sisters, who are in love with celebrity and going off to the movies to watch.
That Greta Garbo movie that sucked.
Yeah, to watch some crappy Greta Garbo movie. Like, everybody's just, nobody's looking out for him, and he is in need of looking after.
But at the same time, you can apply that to any country in a way.
Sure, I mean, Madrid's not the capital of the world, right? Like, I mean, I think it's just
Really.
it's just talking about.
Maybe them.
Yeah, I think to me, I see it as, I think anything that Hemingway writes is just depressing and kind of cynical, because I feel like that's just who he is or who he was as a person.
He was depressed and cynical.
Yes, and I can relate. But I think that for me, maybe I don't look at it so much as like, oh, like everyone in the city is really just out for themselves. You have people who believe this one thing, people who believe this other thing. It's almost like everybody there has an idea of how to make their lives or the world better, and maybe all of them are wrong. And in fact, I think Paco, as we kind of see in certain ways the danger of being so in love with an idea without thinking about practicality, right? But I think everyone in this book, you could, instead of just saying, oh, well, they're just out for themselves, I get that, but I also might look at it more as like, they all believe in, there's something out there that they want, whatever it is. The one waiter wants, like an anarcho-syndicalist world. Probably not going to happen. The one waiter is just like, I'm just content to have a job. I want to keep working. Paco is like, I want to be a bullfighter. This is what I want. These girls are saying, I love this. I'm in love with this celebrity life and this idea, and like that's what I want. And I think that's great. but I also think the book can be a cautionary tale and say, be careful what you're wishing for.
So what I was thinking as you guys were talking is that I don't think people in this story are actually out for themselves. That's the thing that I think you're getting wrong, is that, because think about it, they said, oh, this woman had a job here, and guess what? They got a job for this one, and Paco. So they're all kind of working together in that sense. But then when you go to the Greta Garbo movie, but I think another thing you want to think about is this goes in hand with the point you were making, where they're looking for this kind of celebrity life. Why didn't they like the movie? Because it was her in situations similar to theirs. So that fantasy of what they like, oh, she's not glamorous in this movie, so we don't like it. All of Madrid hated it because it's representing more of what they're used to.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're looking for that celebrity life, but they are actually, in fact, helping each other. So
They are to an extent. I mean, it depends
any
on
Western. You can apply that to any Western, any cookie cutout Western.
what?
That fantasy. You would expect if you go out west to Wyoming or Montana, you're going to see a cowboy on a horse, glorified, greatest guy that you'd ever want to meet. But
comes in and saves the day, rides off in the sunset,
And I imagine that
instead
Westerns,
of raping and pillaging.
and I'm also, I would imagine that Westerns are probably more well-known and well-liked in areas where people, that's not, people don't see what it is to be a cowboy or to work at a saloon or stuff like that, I guess.
I mean, I agree with you. I agree that they're not just like completely selfish, and yeah, and it's not really what I was. I guess maybe a better way of saying it is that they're not like oriented in a way that's going to be beneficial to themselves or to others necessarily, and it's because of the fact that they are so enamored with this idea of celebrity, this idea of glamour. The sisters, right? They bring Paco there. That's true, but at the same time, like I said, where are they? When Paco needs them, they're off looking at a movie. So it's like, not that it's any one person's fault what happens to Paco. He's just caught up in the city, and if you look at the city, he's kind of an organism. He's just kind of not properly ready to deal with the surroundings, I think.
I think everybody has their dreams and desires, though, too. So having dreams and desires does not make one selfish, as some may argue. It's just a matter of how one acts and whether or not they can keep things under control and have a rational.
I mean, it depends on what you desire.
It depends on how. For instance, the two sisters wanted to be glamorous celebrities. In this case, it seemed like they just wanted to be glamorous celebrities. But why do you want to be a celebrity? Do you want to do good with your celebrity, or do you just want to have a lot of money that you can blow on any old thing?
I feel like in this situation, it wasn't so much that they were looking to be like, hey, I want to blow all this. I think they just wanted out of the life they were in. So this Greta Garbo, how they saw her it was like almost like Paco looking at these bullfighters. It was their fantasy, what they want to become, and then I think that's
or
kind of
what they wish they were.
right. Just something to get out of this reality. So, and it's obviously something they did. I think they said weekly or all the time. So it's not like they shouldn't be held responsible for Paco in the end there.
No, I don't. I'm not necessarily saying that, but I'm just saying that
their routine has been established with what he said throughout the story.
Paco made the decision to drink the alcohol and engage in reckless bullfighting activities with inanimate objects with the help of a dishwasher.
Through the narrative,
He was also drunk.
right? And through the narrative, we learn that the dishwasher isn't really the nicest kid. He's a few years older, so he's probably a little bit of a bully. So Paco might even, in one sense, kind of look up to him, and then they were a little too far gone mentally with the drinking for him to really realize, the older kid probably can handle his alcohol a little better. He realizes, like, oh wait, no, this is not a good idea. But Paco's like, screw that, I'm a bullfighter. I do this all the time in my head, so.
Hemingway calls them a cynic, the dishwashers. You know what I mean? So they go out of the way to say that this guy's not altogether a good guy.
Yes.
And
I mean, I don't think being a cynic means you're a bad person. That you're not
I mean,
yeah,
it's not gonna lead you anywhere good to be a cynic. I mean, it's just what do you value?
Mhm.
Because I think that ultimately you have to have values, and they got to be worth the effort
Mhm.
and true.
I would definitely say that is the.
I don't know what a true value. What does it mean to have a true value though? Like, because my idea is like, and like it
Depends
has to
on
be
the
worth
perspective
it,
you're taking.
and that's my that's like maybe to
My values can be
him.
completely different than yours and yours and yours. We might have similar thoughts and feelings, but values generally go through experience. What you experience is what's going to dictate your values, your morals, and things like that. So we don't know much about this dishwasher, just that he's a cynic, but maybe he goes home at night and gets beaten by his father
Mhm.
every night for no reason.
Those
don't
things
know.
are left out,
So
which you do have no idea.
Well, as far as all that goes, it's a really difficult subject, like whether or not there is like some kind of objective values versus whether or not everything is relative. And I mean that's a tough argument
Mhm.
because ultimately, like if you take the relativism to be true and choose to believe that all morality is subjective and relative, then basically you're living in a valueless world where where nothing is worth more than anything else if you follow it through to its conclusion. And if that's the case, then it's only a matter of time before nihilism sets in.
Mm.
But I have also a very different view of nihilism in certain ways, and although I don't know, this is a thought I had that kind of relates to this, is that I feel like one of the takeaways of the story that I got is like, I'm really into Rick and Morty right now, and there's this quote right now from that show that I really keep going back to a lot, which is, nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, we're all gonna die. And I really got that out of this short story. Like, Paco is like this, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid, I'm so excited, I'm gonna be a bullfighter, this is great. And then all of a sudden, well, he dies. And in the great scheme of the universe, like, his death is inconsequential. It doesn't matter. The fact that he existed, the fact that he disappeared, didn't matter. Which sounds really depressing, but also something I like about the kind of thinking about this idea that maybe my life doesn't matter in this grand scheme of things is that because I'm don't have the pressure now of saying, well, every single thing I do matters, I'm now kind of free to say, hey, maybe my life doesn't matter, but I can make it better because there's no point to it. I want my life to be decent. So I want to be able to enjoy the things that I can while I'm here and make things better for myself and others. In a weird way. I feel like nihilism always gets this rap that's like, oh, it's super negative, which it can be, but I also think it can be really freeing in some ways to say like, well, yeah, maybe nothing does matter, but just because nothing matters doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a decent life while we're here.
Yeah, but it's a contradiction.
No, it's
Because
not.
what's a decent life then if nothing matters?
It's whatever.
makes you happy. If you're happy in your life, then you've lived your life. If you feel you've lived your life to its fullest, it doesn't matter what the world thinks of you. If you're okay with what you've done.
What's that mean? The fullest?
Intuitive
fullest
satisfaction.
That's an individual thing. Like I might think that it's me just being married and making my wife and family happy.
There
Maybe
you
that's
go.
my life to the fullest. But for you, maybe it's like, well, I need to make a mark on the world, like he was just saying. It depends on the person, I think.
But you're saying that one of those things is not objectively better than the other?
In my opinion, it is.
No, I think that there's a very good case to be made for the fact that there are objective values, and that the entire pursuit of what we've been doing throughout civilization is trying to figure out what they are. And we may, and we've just kind of been honing them.
It's weird. It's one of the downsides when people say, oh, well, nothing matters. Well, I'm like, I get that nothing matters, but just because, if you believe that nothing matters, I feel like that doesn't mean that that there's going to be no consequences to your actions, I think you can tell yourself, oh, it doesn't matter if, I, like you said, if I commit this heinous act of violence. And sure, you can tell yourself it doesn't matter, and in the grand scheme of things, one day this world will be gone and we won't exist. And so in that grand scheme of things, sure, we can say it doesn't really matter what happened here because, how many billions of years from now this planet will have been absorbed by the sun or whatever. I don't know. It won't be here or something.
I think human extinction will take place long before that.
Sure. But I also think that as people, even if we say nothing matters, we can still have this sense of compassion and kind of understand, think about it, I don't think I want to just, randomly be a victim of this act of violence, so why should I do that to someone else?
I just want to add that it's more than compassion, it's responsibility. And that's the thing that, we have to realize. It's scary to think that we are all responsible for each other. To be compassionate towards something, is the way that a mother feels toward an infant. It's it is what it is. You can't be too compassionate either, because people have to be able to be, to reach their full potential in their own lives. And if you're infantilizing them, then that's not going to happen, right? If you're saying, oh, this person just can't do that. I'm legally blind, right? So I get this. It drives me crazy, when people try to do things for me and stuff like that, or excuse me from certain, it drives me nuts, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to be put into a box where I'm limited to a point where I feel like I can't actually find out what my own limits are. You know what I mean? To be limited by others. You understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't. I think that's totally fair. I think that that's a really important conversation that people don't have a lot. I think I do agree with the idea that we do have responsibility to one another, but also that we shouldn't infantilize people. We shouldn't be able to say. We should allow people to be able to explore, as you said, their own individual limits and be able to do the things that they can do. And I also agree. I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think that if this dishwasher, right, the cynic, if not for the fact that he challenges Paco's courage, Paco doesn't die that night, but he does, and he does it out of a cynical reason to kind of talk about why the fact that he is not brave enough to go into the thing. So he says, well, you wouldn't be brave enough either. And he's like, well, yes, I would be brave enough. And then he's like, no, you wouldn't. Look at these knives. This is the horns. If these knives were coming at you, you wouldn't, and then it just kind of builds from there. And then to the point where he's like, do it. And then he's like, oh, now what? Now what do I do? And then, there's a discussion to be had whether, she should do it at that point or not. But
it is also, the dishwasher's responsibility for even getting to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
They were both intoxicated, though, which impairs both of their judgments.
Well, again, Paco, I think in this story is naive. He can't really be held accountable to the same extent that Paco did, or that the dishwasher can, because by the very fact that the dishwasher is cynical shows that he is wiser than Paco, because Paco doesn't even know what cynicism is.
You mix naivety with alcohol,
but I also think
the result is not very good either.
I agree, but I also think that yes, alcohol, being inebriated affects people's judgment, but I also think that there are things that I will never do, and regardless of how drunk I am, I will never do them. Am I the type of person to go ahead and tie knives to a chair, regardless of if I'm stone cold sober or completely drunk? No, that's something that I would never do. So I think that, yes, while we can all, it's totally fair to say they're both inebriated, they made very bad decisions. I think we can also say, but those decisions were in them the whole time.
I don't think they were. I don't think that it was in their thought that he was actually going to get stabbed by them and he was going to kill him. But it did present a similar to. It presented a danger that would be similar to the bull's horns, which originally the title of this story was Horns of a Bull.
Yeah.
But they changed it to the capital of the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, because it's not, right? It's not a bull, right? Like a bull and the fierceness of a bull, looking at an actual bull would probably terrify you more than if somebody that you knew was holding a chair with knives on it. You know what I mean? Even though the fact that he's going to be running at you,
Mm-hmm.
there's just something about the fact that you are dealing with, you know, this solidly muscular, actually chaotic beast, you know, that will very easily kill you.
They were improvising though.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, it's kind of it's a false dichotomy to say that they're the same thing, because they're not.
No, of course.
I mean, they're both very dangerous, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess where I'm going with, I don't know that. Never mind.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody was arguing that they were same or different because chair, bowl, I get it.
Yeah, they're different. They're different.
Do we have any final thoughts that we wanted to wrap up with?
Sure. Okay, Hemingway. I respect what he's done for writing and literature, but not a fan. I find his work immensely boring. He can throw out some good characters, maybe. Maybe I'm not masculine enough, and I'm supposed to be this big masculine, but I just don't get it. I know some people in the literary world, especially college students who are taking all the classes, are like, no, Hemingway's the god, and I don't think so. He's overrated. Again, what he's done for writing, he doesn't waste a word. It's beautiful prose, story-wise, boring as hell.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm glad that, you know, I was thinking like, I'm like, maybe Hemingway's just too hyper-masculine for me. Because I'm reading the story and I'm just like, oh, I'm sure there are people who are so in love with bullfighting, you know, and also culturally that's not, you know, something that I would be interested in. But I'm also just like, I don't know how you would actually feel like you have to defend, like, my own strength and, like, this, you know, idea I have of myself, where I'm like, sure, tie some knives to a chair, run at me. I mean, but people do stuff like that, and I don't know. So,
What are your thoughts about the section where the coward engages in an interaction with one of the sisters?
See, I was trying to think about that one too. Like, that was something I was really thinking about. It's like, in one sense, I don't see the point to it, but then on the other side, if you look at it from a character point of view, maybe because he's a coward, he's trying to, again, get that almost like compensate, basically.
And it came
for
out very much like the bullfight.
I didn't put that together, but yes, I
And
could
it
see
seemed as if she was getting away from him and she had a ferocity.
that. Okay.
And also the fact that if the coward is trying to assert himself with a woman, it really takes on a gender study. But then again, Hemingway always seems to.
He kind of mistreats women in his stories, though. I can't think of the one story I'm thinking of, but basically he's telling the girl to have an abortion. They were trying.
It was like well.
Okay. Yeah. What was the character's name? It was like Boo, or it was some kind of weird name that he gave the girl. But yeah, that, you know. And so I feel like he's kind of in his stories, from what I've read, and again, I haven't made it through much. He kind of has that. I don't know if it's misogynistic, but he kind of has a bit of a unfair treatment to women.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because he's super masculine, I think. But
No, I mean, if you look at his life too, I mean, you know, his mother was not a particularly kind or a good woman, you know. Like, so I agree that he's definitely kind of rough on women. In general, I think that might be true. Like, I mean, if you look at his own relationships, you know, he's married 3 or 4 times, and I don't think he was married when he died or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you got to take it for what it is. And yeah, he did. He revolutionized writing in a way. I think what I admire about Hemingway most is that he's trying to be genuine. Like, he's not trying to manipulate or anything. He's just trying to describe the world as he sees it. And what he said in somewhere at one point was that he looked at the people that he knew and tried to write about them if they were put into situations, you know, that they're not in. So, like, what would this personality be like in this situation? What would that personality be like in that situation? And how would that work? So, and that's how we kind of try to be true. You know what I mean? Like by trying to do that. And I think that's it's positive. And you know, I've read a lot of Hemingway, and I've always found him very fascinating. But I look at things differently now, and I'm not sure anymore what I think of them. But I would like to read them again.
yeah, I think sometimes, like, even with this, I'll just be reading Hemingway and kind of like, I'm sure there's a greater theme I'm supposed to be taking out of this, but I'm really not sure what it is.
I would say that I agree with you. But I don't know, I haven't pinpointed a reason for it yet. It's just something that's really complex about him, and I think that it's something worth
Maybe that's
studying.
the draw of him, is because as much as I've read of him and as much as I've disliked everything I've read of him, I still sit there saying, I should be reading more Hemingway, and I'm not sure why. And so
It's
maybe
all like-
that's the appeal, that's the pull. It's like there's something mysterious about it, that it's like, well, everybody says he's so great, what am I missing? How am I
I may
missing?
very well be thinking that too.
So
I'm reading it and I'm like, I need to get, I'm supposed to get something out of this. I don't know what I got out of it. I'm gonna read his next story. And then again, I'm like, things happen. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of this.
it's like, why is this guy still on the boat? Get off the boat!
And in Hills Like White Elephants, the girl's name was Jig.
Jig, yes, Jig, okay.
Alrighty then, if you're interested in checking out Hemingway's short stories, here is my copy from Scribner's. I got this from Secondhand Books in Laurel. It is very old. I think this was released when he was still living, but it's a pretty hardy collection of what he's written. And then you have...
Oh yeah, I actually got it right from here, the library. It's just the complete short stories of Ernest Hemingway.
Mm.
It's called the, I can't remember, you got that one? Finca Vigia?
Yeah, sure.
The Finca Vigia edition. Whatever that means. So, go for it.
Alrighty.
I won't.
Be sure to join us next time for another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.